Welcome to the Pro Design Builder podcast, a show where professionals and entrepreneurs share their stories, strategies, and secrets to building a successful business and a successful life. I'm Sam, your host, as we dive deep into the world of life experiences and entrepreneurship. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, the Pro Design Builder, which is a coaching consulting firm for real estate investors who want to build spec homes and multifamily projects. The Pro Design Builder, it's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design. Also, just wanted to thank our other sponsors, the Nest Collab, which is a incubator for real estate investors who want to invest. There's several different areas where we specialize, whether it's flipping, building, short sales, or creative finance. The Nest Collab would be the home for you. There'll be a link in the description for that. We are hosting a house flipping 101 boot camp March 26th and 27th in Tampa. There'll be a link in the description for that. And then there's a Fort Lauderdale date, which is April 16th and 17th in Fort Lauderdale. So if you're a real estate investor, you want to get in the game, you don't understand fully how it's done, dive into a boot camp with us. It's a 2-day affair. There'll be a link in the description there. So as you know, foster care is a mission that's near and dear to our heart. I've adopted 2 kids. I'm currently fostering now. I've had a number of kids through our home. If you ever feel led to give to our foster care initiative, there'll be a link in the description. Some of the things that we support and we feel strongly about, which is purchasing beds for foster care, foster parents, and adoptive parents. Typically, when there's a transition, that need is there. We want to meet that need. Also, as the primary cook in the home, anytime there's a meal provided for us, it takes the pressure off of feeding 6 now for us. So if we could provide a meal for another foster family, that's something that we want to do. Also, too, we feel strongly about a strong family. So if we can provide an additional date night that keeps the unit strong, which is something that we want to support. So there'll be a link in the description for that. So without further ado, I just wanted to introduce our guest, Adam Rossen, which is a criminal defense attorney. The Rossen Law Firm defends criminals versus for various amount of accusations and crimes, whether it's DUI, criminal defense, or anything of those sort. Just wanted to thank our guest for coming on today.
Yeah, Sam, thanks for having me. And, first of all, I want to thank you for having me, but also absolutely love the mission that you have with foster care. I've known you for a little bit, and I know foster care has always been something near and dear to your heart. And look, it's similar but different to what we do. So we actually don't use the C word in my firm. At the
Correct.
Rossen Law Firm, right?
Yeah,
We don't
because
use
these are
criminal.
accusations. Yep.
Right, but also our firm's motto is we help good people when bad things happen so they can achieve their best future. So look, there are, in criminal defense, right? There's a lot of people that, people that make very bad choices, and there are some very bad people. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, we've been able to craft and kind of create a law firm where the vast majority of our clients are amazing people, great people who either are falsely accused through the system or they
Yep.
maybe made a 1 or 2 time bad choice. So that's something
Mhm.
that I think is very unique to me and my firm. Whereas most people in criminal defense, yeah, I mean, they're representing rough and tough people, or there is no greater mission behind the firm. It's let's make money, let's make money, let's run a business. Where, yeah, we're running a
Mhm.
business too, but there is a true identifiable mission for the firm. We have our vision, we have our core values that we live by. So that's something I'm very proud of, the way the firm's evolved over the years.
Yeah, thank you for that. So at the time that I met you, you weren't a dad yet. So
Right.
now that you you are a dad, I wanted to kind of hear what is dad life for you right now?
Well, I know, when I met you, you weren't a dad either,
No,
right?
I
And
wasn't. I
so,
wasn't. This kind of
well,
happened at the same time.
right. I feel like you and I have been on parallel journeys, and I love seeing you on social media with your kids. And I'm always like, man, he's such a great dad. I was like, because we had talks back in the day too about,
For
right,
sure.
you wanting to be a dad and stuff. And right now, I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, two boys. They're the most amazing, boys in the world. I mean, it. I became a father at 38, and 38 and 41. I'm turning 44 in a month, so it's kind of crazy to me also. But I mean, it's the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life, and here we are, having such an amazing impact with the law firm in our community, and we've helped thousands of people, and we're going to help tens of thousands more. And my two boys are still, my crowning achievement. It's the greatest thing in my life. I mean, I absolutely love being a dad. Not everybody loves being a dad. I absolutely love it. It
Yeah,
is
no, no,
it, it
I
really is the
completely.
best thing I've ever done.
No, no, I completely agree with you. Obviously, when I met you, I expressed to you what foster care, meant for me and being a dad, and I wanted to really kind of get to that chapter of being a dad, and we kind of got there at around the same time. So it's been a great experience just to kind of like pour into your kids, everything that you've gained as far as knowledge, experience, and stuff like that. They don't fully get it, right? And then
Right,
so there's this passion that, especially for me, that I have, that I'm kind of like, hey, listen, I'm trying to do it right now for you. And I just want you to understand that this means a lot to me. I feel like my kids kind of, they kind of get it, especially for me.
right.
I'm dealing with some more serious topics, with, adopting kids and fostering kids. So I don't shy around dealing with, hey, listen, this is where life began for you. So, the dad life thing is something that's extremely important to me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah. And
So,
and look, I became a father at 38. I don't know
mhm.
what kind of father I would have been at 28.
Correct,
Definitely
correct, correct.
nowhere
Definitely
near,
different,
right, what
different
I am
father for
now.
sure.
It wouldn't have been the same at 33, right? And
Mhm.
look, I mean, I was focused on different things and just building the law firm. Still, like, I mean, I'm still mature, but immature in some ways.
Yeah.
I still think I have the maturity level of a 16-year-old probably half the time. But I'm so glad that I had my children when I did.
Mhm.
Just it was the absolute right time for me.
No, 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 makes perfect sense. So with that, one of the things that we like to do is kind of like go back and kind of like peel the onion a little bit and kind of get to know you as a kid. Like what were you like as a kid, and were there early signs of your path today?
So, it's very interesting. So, my dad is a dentist, and so his side of the family, very smart, very intelligent. My dad's an amazing dentist. And then my mom's side was more street smart, less educated, but more street smart, business, entrepreneurship. So, I always kind of had that dichotomy of my dad's side of save your pennies, my grandparents, right? I mean,
Yep.
they grew up in the Depression.
Yep.
Save your pennies. You're going to go bankrupt.
Correct.
Work for someone else. Stability. Entrepreneurship is bad. And then
Mhm.
my mom's side of, yeah, school's important, but it's not the be all end all. You don't need to be, just an amazing lawyer. Open a business, right? Work on those things. And so it was always a dichotomy, but I think for the vast majority of it, my dad's side won, where it was get good grades, go to school, get good grades. I went to the best schools. Go to law school, be a lawyer, hone in on your skills. Don't I went to University of Florida. Don't take general business classes because
Mhm.
there are wastes, and everybody does business, and it's not exciting, and it's not. The key to stability and the key to success is a profession, right? And so that kind of won out, but I always had it in the back of my mind. And so I always knew, that I would do some things and own my own business. But look, my dad owned his own dental, office. But if you've ever read the E Myth or the E Myth Revisited
Mhm.
or know a lot about that,
Yep.
my
Yep. Yep.
dad was I think, Sally from Sally's Pies, where he ran his own business, but
Correct.
basically he ran
He
his own job.
he yeah,
That
exactly. He ran his own job and he was attached
Right.
to it. Yeah, the whole
He
time.
never had a moment where, he had an associate dentist or he had multiple operatories and it was him. It was only him.
Hmm.
So I learned a lot from observing him and eventually getting older and thinking it through. But also as a kid, I was very shy around strangers, but very outgoing in my comfort zone. But I'm still a natural introvert. And even
Hmm.
today, I host my own podcast. I was on a guest on 3 podcasts last week. I'm a trial lawyer, right? I
Yep.
can make a passionate closing argument in front of strangers. And but I'm still, now I do a lot of speaking and coaching work. I've spoken on stages with 300 people, but I'm
Hmm.
still a natural introvert. But from when I was a teenager, and I was a very good basketball player too, but just for my teenage years, I learned, I started to push myself out of my comfort zone to really improve upon that. And so now I'm not shy anymore. I go into a room with strangers and I'll do my thing, but at the end, I go home and I'm like, I just want to be left alone. I need to
Don't.
recharge. Um, but I've learned, and I've pushed myself to be the best version of myself that I
No,
can
no,
be.
no. That's so relatable to me because I I've I'm an introvert around the people I'm comfortable with, but no, I'm an extrovert around people that I'm
Right.
comfortable with, but I'm naturally feel like I'm an introvert, just because it's just stylistically, I knew I had the ability to be an extrovert, but I just kind of prefer to kind of be more to myself. I think there was just a lot of life and society and things like that that kind of drove me into that space, but I also felt like I had the ability to be comfortable with having conversations with people on podcasts or openly being myself, but I just never felt really fully safe. So something I never disclosed to you was my degree was in political science and criminal justice. So I
Nice.
had a pretty good understanding, and I wanted to pursue, law enforcement. Coming out of college, I applied for New Jersey State Police because that was a stepping stone to the FBI. So I was pretty certain like that was kind of like my path. So, but all of that requires, growing to be comfortable. So I completely kind of relate with what you shared with me.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm a big believer in pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And for me, it really started in high school and everything. And it's been one big long journey. But one more thing I want to share with you is it's funny because my wife and I always joke. My wife's a prosecutor. She's very extroverted. She could just, I don't know, people gravitate towards her.
Hmm.
And look, I do have a bit of a public persona that is mostly me, but it's a persona sometimes
Correct.
when I'm speaking on stage with 300 people. But my wife and I will be on a plane. And
Hmm.
we always joke because I'm the one that has a hoodie on, hoodies up. I got my earbuds in. I'm reading. I'm
You don't want to be
focused.
bothered. Yeah, exactly.
And my wife makes a friend on every single flight.
Yeah.
Just looking at
Hmm.
her and I'm like, "What are you
You're like,
doing?
how are you doing this? Yeah,
Like
exactly.
these are strangers. We don't talk to strangers." I'm like, and she's just like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
just happy we're in this steel tube,
Yeah.
40,000 feet in the sky, and I'm
Exactly.
just happy reading my book or being focused while she's made a best friend and knows everything about her new best
Hmm.
friend." So
Yeah.
just different people. I can turn it on as needed, but
Hmm.
my default is just, more quiet,
More
introspective
quiet,
introvert.
introspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of relate that to more to like kind of like my wife. She's introspective and through time she's been able to be more extroverted. And as I've become more extroverted, she's kind of gravitated towards that because it's just a little bit of a requirement. But who would you say was your biggest influence growing up, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, that's a great question. If I have to really say, and I had a lot of influences from my parents, both my grandparents. We're a very small family growing up, but really, I mean, definitely my mom, my dad, and both, sets of especially grandfathers for me. If I really had to pick one, especially now at 43 years old, looking back, I really would say my mom's dad, who was the entrepreneur, who was the smart but uneducated, right, entrepreneur who retired maybe in 1980 and retired. He owned and operated a coin operated laundry machines in Queens and retired with a few million, sold the company for a few $1 million back then. And it was just hard work, hustle, street smarts. A lot of over the years, he's talking to me about things that he has to do with politicians and the mob and all these different, and just navigating all these things in Queens and New York and
Mm-hmm.
different things, and it's all just street smart entrepreneurship business stuff. So he was a major influence on me, but also my dad's dad too. He was very smart, and just and one thing I do want to say is seeing my dad, my whole family, both sides, very hard workers. And we've built one of the things always for me, whether it was as an athlete, as a coach, as a high school basketball coach, as building the firm, because even now we have about 23 people. We have 6 lawyers. We're the largest criminal defense firm in South Florida. It's blue collar work ethic with white collar skill and ability, and that's really major thing that I learned from everybody in my family is we Rossens work hard.
Mm-hmm.
We are hard workers. We might be very intelligent in white collar skill, but we are hard workers. And I've always had that.
No, no, that's you said a couple things that kind of resonate with me. You said street smart entrepreneur,
Mm.
right? I just feel like there's just naturally a gift that comes from being street smart and learning certain experiences, although sometimes rough, right?
Right.
And in your profession, you're dealing with a lot of street smart entrepreneurs,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So I'll just ask this question: is what has that taught you about entrepreneurship? Because there's lessons to learn from each client and each street smart entrepreneur.
Right. Well, I mean, you got to do it legally.
Correct.
Okay.
What for sure? Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so that's one thing. Obviously, some of my
Yeah,
clients don't do it legally,
correct.
but also some of my clients, some of those street smart, criminal entrepreneurs are brilliant.
Correct.
They're brilliant minds, and if they just used it for good, they
Correct.
and in today, look, we're in 2025. There's so many ways to make money and be
There's so many ways.
successful through entrepreneurship, but legal entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I mean, I look, my 5-year-old son loves video games, and we're
Mhm.
always like, oh, we don't want him to play too many and different things. The
Yep.
kid's
I'm in the
brilliant,
same boat. Yep.
I think, and he's funny. When this kid is 8 or 10 or 12 years old, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, I want to put him on Twitch because this kid's gonna make money
Yeah.
streaming video games because he's good, he's funny, and he loves it. Now, is that the best thing to do for a 10 or 12-year-old? Who knows?
Yeah.
But right, but there's ways, and I was like, why can't my kid be a YouTube star, be an
Correct.
Instagram star, right? So and even with more of my clients, I mean, again, if they just took a fraction of the amount of intelligence and hustle that they put into illegal endeavors and put it into legal endeavors, they would be very successful in that field, right? They just
No,
need to be focused.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I shared with you that my background was political science and criminal justice. So one of my favorite shows is American Greed, right?
Yeah.
So I just can't get enough of it. So so but it shows you so much, and in some of the same themes that you're talking about now is if they redirected it towards a legal path, there's no question that these people
Yeah.
would be brilliant or be million or gajillionaires, and no
Right.
questions, from there. So, what was there a defining moment in your childhood that you feel like that shaped you?
In my childhood, not really. No, I mean, well, the one thing I would say is I did switch high schools at the end of my sophomore year. And so that, I guess I would say that probably was because um, I went to Pinecrest, which is,
Okay.
a phenomenal school down
Yeah.
here, right? You're a Gibbons guy, right?
Yeah, I'm a
If
Gibbons
I
guy. Yeah.
remember,
I went to Gibbons.
I
Yeah.
remember, Sam. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for
where
sure.
it's Pinecrest, Gibbons, and Westminster. It's that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
triangle
for sure.
right
For sure. For
there.
sure.
Right. And so, look, I was, I went to Pinecrest Boca and then went to Pinecrest Fort Lauderdale 9th and 10th. And then I transferred and I went to Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood. And I'm
Okay.
Jewish and going to a Catholic school. Now,
Oh, okay.
that was great. Well, also growing up in Boca, we have a Christian school, St. Andrews. I think it's
St. Andrews. Yep.
Episcopalian. And St. Andrews is probably 40% Jewish. So at
Correct.
St. Andrews, it's completely normal to be Jewish and go to St. Andrews. Well,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Chaminade, there were
Yes.
3 Jews out of about 800
Oh,
students.
wow. Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to learn, right? And to go to Catholic school and learn about that. I actually really
Hmm.
enjoyed that. It was really
Hmm.
cool. But the biggest defining factor was realizing that the Pinecrest bubble that I lived in and grew up in was completely different. And here I am still at a private school, but seeing how different it is. And I realized pretty quickly, I was like, wait a minute. Wow. I was the dumb poor kid at Pinecrest.
Hmm.
And I didn't grow up poor and I didn't grow up dumb, but
Correct.
at
Correct. Correct.
Pinecrest, when you're dealing with, massive generational wealth,
Correct.
I was the poor dumb kid, right?
Hmm.
And then I go to Chaminade and all of a sudden, and this is me at 16 years old going,
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
I'm the smart rich kid here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm rich because I'm driving my grandmother's 10-year-old car. 10 year,
Yeah.
I'm driving, it's 1998 and I'm driving a 1988 Mercury Cougar, two-door
Yeah.
coupe.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so it was a great lesson to me on perspective.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, it really was. And we had a very good basketball team at Chaminade. I lived about 40 minutes away. We had 6 a.m. practice. We had 2-a-days. So I'm up at 5 driving there, 16 years old. My parents let me do that, drive 40 minutes a day times 2. And
Hmm.
I really became pretty independent. So
Yeah.
just that whole experience, I'd say that had a major impact on my life. And I learned a
No.
lot from it.
No. For sure. It makes you more well rounded, right? So
Right.
some of the things that I wrote down here was bubble and perspective, right? So I'll give you a little bit of perspective. For me, I was born in Haiti, and then I came to the States through political asylum, and then dropped in the middle of the hood during crack epidemic, right? So my
Wow.
bubble looked very different, and then when I got to Gibbons, I was in a very different bubble, right?
Right. Yeah.
And from a life experience standpoint, and then I was able to kind of see out for so to speak, for the first time, because I was seeing out of my bubble and seeing different life perspectives. So I have a very wide ranging life experience. So that's kind of like why I do what I do in foster care, because I was able to see life in my initial bubble, right?
Right.
Which was,
Yeah.
it was trash. But I saw it and I could kind of relate. So then when I do work in foster care, or when I do work in homeless, when I talk to the homeless and feed the homeless and stuff like that, I could relate. And then when I move into different aspects of business and stuff like that, I could kind of relate there. So I could see how that perspective really really helped you. So I mean, it sounded like you were always a pretty good student. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. So, did you always know that you wanted to be an attorney, or wanted to be in criminal defense, or how did that come about? Tell me.
So there was definitely in my household pressure of you got to be a lawyer or a doctor, and there's a
Hmm.
saying, right? In all Jewish households, good Jewish boys are raised to be doctors, lawyers, or accountants.
Yeah.
Definitely not police officers or anything
Yep.
dangerous,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, but for me, it was either medicine or law. I really loved both. I was interested in both, and I loved both because they helped people, and I
Yep.
wanted to really help. Now, I loved watching Law and Order as a kid. I really loved that. But um, at the end of high school, I made a decision. I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to be a doctor, and I
Okay.
went to UF, went to University of Florida. And my freshman year, I'm a microbiology major, and I'm taking a chemistry class, and I'm in a you know what's like a concert hall with 600
Correct.
students being
Hmm.
taught by a TA who barely speaks English. And
Yep.
these chemistry and biology courses were done to weed people out of the program. It was
Correct. Correct.
intentionally
Correct. Correct.
done to be
Hmm.
very difficult. And I just realized I was like, I don't want
I
to
don't
do
know if I
this.
just want to do. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and I was so always so fascinated with law, with criminal law, but also criminology and psychology. So I dropped the semester, and I luckily I came in with credits and stuff. So I dropped the semester, and I made the decision at 18, 19 years old. I said, and I was always kind of the master at working like the school course catalog. And
Hmm.
so I looked at it and I was like, okay, I'm dropping, I'm going to criminology. I'm super interested in this. And I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't know
Correct.
it necessarily was going to be criminal law, though. I knew I wanted
Hmm.
to be a trial lawyer.
Hmm.
And a year into criminology, I'm loving it. It's so fascinating. But I'm also saying, well, it's really a relatively easy major,
Yep.
fascinating, but easy.
Yeah.
I can also add on psychology, which I love as well, and I'm so interested in it.
Hmm.
And I can have a dual degree, and both degrees are not worth that much without a master's or a
Correct.
PhD or law
Hmm.
school. But I'm so fascinated and interested in both. And I'm like, screw it, I'm going to get a dual degree, a double major, basically.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
And so I added on psychology. I did it, still graduated on time. Loved it. It was fascinating. And then I went to Miami, University of Miami for law school. I still didn't know if it was going to be, civil, maybe personal injury,
Correct. Correct. Correct.
maybe criminal, wanted to help people, but I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. And then from there, I kind of grabbed, one thing led to another, and I became a prosecutor,
Hmm.
which I can go into as well if you want
No,
me
no,
to.
no, no, for sure. That's just part of the process because I feel like when you become a prosecutor, you get both ends of the stick. So one of my best friends was a prosecutor for about 15 years. So and she's a bulldog
Yeah.
defense attorney, right? Which I just kind of like love hearing her stories. So I know that definitely played into, your ability to be successful as a criminal defense attorney. So yeah, just dive into a little bit about what prosecution looked like for you.
Yeah, so well, I was a certified legal intern. So basically, I acted, I was an intern at the prosecutor's office. Absolutely loved it. I had 5 jury trials before I graduated law school. I get the job. I'm there as a young prosecutor. It was so much fun. They hired 30 of us. We're all, rough, I don't know, 15 of us were maybe, 25 years old. We became fast friends in a way. It was college 3.0. We had regular college, then law school was
Yeah,
college
yeah, yeah.
2.0.
Hmm.
And this, I mean, it was like Grey's Anatomy for law. It was
Yeah,
fun.
for sure.
Okay. Trying cases. I'm 25, you know, living in downtown, single, living a single life. It was great. It was awesome. But I only lasted 2 years, and I've never been good at being an employee for a boss that I don't think values me. I
Correct.
respected my bosses for their legal skill, their legal talent. I did
Hmm.
not respect them for their leadership because I thought they had very poor leadership.
Yep.
And I didn't, I was a young star in that office and nobody
Mhm.
knew about me. Nobody cared about me. And I don't need people to coddle me or
Correct. Correct.
anything,
Correct.
but just a simple, hey, you're doing a great job at 7 o'clock at night and you're still working here,
Correct.
in an 8 by 10, interior office. You can barely pay your student loans. Like, I
Yep.
appreciate you. Keep up the good work. Not even that.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of an incident with the police. And when you're seeing the same officers being accused of the same things, I didn't think I was helping people when it's political and our bosses were saying, you got to get their backs. And I was just like,
Correct.
no, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I wanted to be a homicide prosecutor. I wanted to
Yeah.
be in that office 20,
Mm-hmm.
30 years. And very quickly on, I was like, you know what? I'm 26 years old. I'm gonna start my own law firm. I got nothing to lose. I'm used to not making much money. I already can barely pay my student loans. So, right, I'm not married. I have no real responsibility. Screw it. I'm gonna start my own law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. Um, with my roommate at the time, he was also a prosecutor, and we were partners for about 8 years together.
Mm-hmm.
And we were too dumb to fail in a way.
Yeah, you had ambition, right? So
Right.
ambition
Yeah.
is a beautiful thing. So you talk about this dichotomy of seeing the same officer for, whatever the situation is. And I want to just kind of preface this because I want to say that we are I'm pro law enforcement, but I do
So am
have
I.
a better, exactly, because I know you are. I do have a background in law and injustice and criminology, and one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue law enforcement and be into the FBI is because I saw law enforcement from a different perspective, which is in a drug infested neighborhood, and I really
Right.
I didn't like what I saw, so I felt like I would be a better officer, for that respect.
Right.
So I'll just kind of share one story. One of my my prosecutor friend had shared with me, but she was saying to me, um, there was a case where same officer, he charged a client, um possession. It was like 30 pills or something like that, for one client, and then for someone else he charged 31 counts for each pill
Yeah.
for a different case. Right, these are the types of things that happen that people may not be enlightened to, but depends on the violation at first touch, which is something I want to touch on. So, if you don't mind, just kind of shine a little bit of light about what happens at violation at first touch when it comes to, officers.
Well, so just to clarify, like specifically, what are you talking about with
All right, all
that?
right. So in my criminology class,
Mhm.
one of the things that it was crime and injustice, and it talked about crime violation at first touch, which is uh typically sometimes what happens in a criminal case is the violation at first touch may be a situation where the rights never should have been violated, or now the rights are violated in a very different way. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Hopefully that kind of clears that up.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, look, one of the things that really frustrated me, and I think it's a political, but it's also more of a philosophical
Correct.
conversation when
Mhm.
Fort Lauderdale Police Department, okay, and we're
Mhm.
talking the mid 2000s,
Correct.
okay, and they're on Sistrunk,
That's where I
and
grew up.
it's
I'm just gonna say it.
okay.
Yeah.
So they're on Sistrunk,
Yeah.
right? And now it's I mean it's
It's
nicer,
different.
right?
It's
They're
different,
doing
yeah.
some things right, but
Yeah.
still mid 2000s. And at that time, the Broward State Attorney's Office was still prosecuting drug cocaine residue cases. So
Correct.
we're talking about a crack pipe that was smoked. The crack is gone, but
Gone.
there's
Yeah.
microscopic residue on the pipe. And instead of charging that as misdemeanor drug paraphernalia, they're charging that as a third degree possession of cocaine and sentencing people to prison.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. I
Correct.
didn't like how the cops, the Fort Lauderdale Raiders is what they were called. They're
Raiders were
the
big back
Raiders,
then. Yeah.
right? Okay, so you've heard everybody who's around that area knows the Raiders. And I remember being a young prosecutor, and I'm walking down, and I'm saying, talking to somebody, and go, "Wow, that guy, that guy looks like a drug dealer. Looks pretty rough." And
Mhm.
the older prosecutor said, "No, that's actually one of the Raiders." And I go, wait, what? I'm like, they got 2 full sleeves. They're, 6'4", 250 pounds, like big beard, looking gruff. They're like, oh yeah, no, those are the undercover cops. And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And the more I'm dealing with them, the more I'm believing that they're violating people's rights all
Mm-hmm.
the time, the
Yeah.
same things over and over again. So
Yeah.
on one hand, it's, well, look, they might be quote unquote cleaning up a bad neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, you're violating, these are people are human beings,
Correct.
right? They're not,
Mm-hmm.
they're not animals, they're not scum, they're
Correct.
human beings, and you're flat out violating their rights. And what would, the founding fathers, right? The people who wrote the Bill of Rights. Remember, our
Mm-hmm.
Constitution was not going to be passed
Correct.
without the Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was specifically against government overreach, government corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had problems with that. And so when they're constantly kicking down doors, roughing people up, the amount of, look, I can tell you, never in my life was I ever stopped for not having a bicycle, my bicycle registered in the city of Boca Raton where I grew up.
I remember
Okay.
that was a thing in Fort Lauderdale. That
Right.
became a thing. I remember that.
And
Yeah.
stopping black
Mm-hmm.
men, young black men, because their bicycle was not registered as a pretext to search for drugs, to harass them, is not cool. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it. And I had problems with it. And then we had, there was a situation on Beach Place where there was maybe 5 or 10 prosecutors celebrating one of our coworkers' engagements.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one of our friends who had a little too much to drink and fell asleep. He didn't
Oh,
pass
jeez.
out, he didn't throw
Mm-hmm.
up, he just fell asleep in a chair next to the dance floor. And there
Mm-hmm.
was virtually nobody in this club on Beach Place.
Okay.
And instead of the cops giving customer service to a group of people who clearly did not look like criminals, did not
Correct.
look like drug dealers or violent people, they
Yep.
pretty much grabbed him and dragged him out and
Oh,
used
wow.
used muscles instead of their brain. And you
Mm-hmm.
didn't, I say to my children, use your words, right? Don't scream, don't yell, don't hit, use your
Mm-hmm.
words.
Correct. Correct.
And
Correct. Correct.
they couldn't use their words.
Yeah.
And it was not a violent altercation, but
Correct.
it definitely became heated, and
Mm-hmm.
I was in the middle of it, and I stuck up for myself and my friends, and it was a situation, and I'm like, look, we're prosecutors. You don't need to give me any special
Mm-hmm.
treatment, but
Correct.
I
Correct.
think
Correct.
I should
Correct. But
have at
I
least like
know my
normal.
rights. Right.
I know my rights, and give me normal human being respect,
Correct.
and we're not doing things wrong.
Yeah.
And just even to see that Monday being called into my boss's office and being said, well, what's the Sun Sentinel going to say? I go, hell if I care.
Yeah.
What they should say is how these cops were wrong,
How
not
what happened? Yeah.
right,
Exactly.
right,
Yeah.
not that we did anything wrong, that these
Yeah.
cops, right, are doing things wrong. And I'm like, look, they're like, well, you were wrong and you should apologize. I go, oh, no, no, no. I go, that no way. We were in the right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, just I know it doesn't specifically answer your question, but just being able to see cops violate people's rights over and over and over again and really have unfettered power, and seeing that what makes all the difference in the world is the quality of defense attorney you can get, because
Mm-hmm.
there's paid private defense attorneys that are terrible.
Yeah.
There's public defenders that are brilliant, but even
Mm-hmm.
the brilliant PDs, when you're overworked and underpaid and you have
Correct. Correct. Correct.
200
Correct.
cases, you can only be
Mm-hmm.
brilliant for 50 to 70 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's I didn't like that, and I still don't like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it gives us power. And look, and I'm pro cop too. I'm pro good cop.
I'm
I'm
always. Yeah. Yep.
I'm pro good lawyer, and
Mm-hmm. I'm
I
pro
will
good
be the
luck too.
first one to say I am
Yeah.
anti bad lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? I have friends that are officers. I respect the job, but especially a lot of the drug cops, the ones that are busting up the bad neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
They take so many liberties. They break the rules.
Correct.
It for the vast majority of those officers, it is the movie
Mm-hmm.
Training Day.
Yeah.
It is, and it's sad and it's wrong, and we fight against it. Um, I wish everybody was I love the detectives who are the
Mm-hmm.
smart ones and use their brain, especially in the financial crimes.
No, that you what you described to me make perfect sense because unfortunately for me, based on my life circumstances, that's where I was. But it gave me perspective, right? So
Right.
everything that you're describing here is kind of what I witnessed, and also too what I took. And I said, all right, well, if I become a at the time I went to UConn, so I became a Jersey State Police, and I wanted to go into FBI. I said I would do it differently, right? Because I did
Yep.
see these violations happening and this mistreatment. So then, what happens is as well is there's a lost trust in the community, right? In the
Yep.
community, they didn't want no part of it, right? And
Right.
there's this stalemate, that happens where the community has lost trust. They got to come in and do their job, but then there's so many people that have come into this community that is, a little bit voiceless, and don't have a voice in remedying some of these, things that happen. So
Well,
I'm
and Sam, let me give you an example about just
go
the
ahead.
community policing and the impact that community policing can have. So, I do a lot
Hmm.
of work with a local charity called In Jacob's Shoes. We give shoes to children in need. For every referral that the firm gets, we actually donate a pair of shoes. We've since 2017, we've donated over 1,100 pairs of shoes. We're very proud of that. And now I've been on the board of directors for about 4 or 5 years as well.
Okay, great.
Through In Jacob's Shoes, I met Deputy Sheriff Kenneth Torrance from Palm Beach Sheriff's Office.
Hmm.
He's from the Tri Cities, Lake Okeechobee area, okay, and he's also, he actually goes by Coach T. Everybody calls him Coach because
Yep.
he's a basketball coach, he's a football coach, and he's a really a pillar of the community. And Sheriff Bradshaw runs a free summer camp for the Tri-Cities. So for Pahokee, South Bay, and I forget the third in the
Probably
Tri-Cities.
Belgrade. Yeah.
Belgrade. So
Yeah.
Belgrade, Pahokee, South Bay. It's completely free. And that's where Coach T is from. And he now he doesn't, he's basically the community liaison
Correct. Correct.
in
Correct.
that community. And the story, and I've known him now for 6 or 7 years. And to see what he's doing with the kids, with the community is brilliant because he's building the trust with law enforcement. And him and I
Correct.
have many conversations over the years. And
Correct.
and
Correct.
he'll
Correct.
talk to maybe some of the white deputies who work in Belglade but don't live in Belglade.
Correct.
And they're like, but why do the kids love you and not love me? And he's like, well, because you might have arrested their father and you're not here to build the relationship. So he's like, so when you're here, it's community policing at its finest. Look,
Correct.
you got to make an arrest, you got to make an arrest, but
Correct. Correct. Correct.
people have to know that you actually care, even
Correct.
if you
Correct.
don't live here, that you care. And they're doing so much, and it is bringing crime rates down. It's
It
helping
is. No, I agree.
community and children. And I would love it if BSO did more of that in our communities, or Fort Lauderdale did that in their communities. Maybe they do, and I just don't know about it. But I
Correct.
can tell you what Coach T does is absolutely amazing.
No, no, no. That does sound amazing, and that's actually what's absolutely required in building more community. So I had well, for me, when I got to college, I made a relationship with a FBI agent, which is kind of like, which was a kind of almost like a liaison to me, because it was an entryway into where I wanted to head. And he was like the head of SWAT at the time, doing missions in Afghanistan and Iraq and
That's
stuff like
cool.
that. So
Yeah.
I had that relationship and that communication with him. So it was pretty big for me. But yeah, joining that, like what you described with Coach T and the community, is absolutely what's required to kind of bridge that gap. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about criminal defense attorneys?
So I think misconceptions. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I mean, most people think we're like Better Call Saul or the Lincoln Lawyer.
yeah,
We're shady, shisty, scummy lawyers.
makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yep.
There are. But I can tell you at our firm, what I always tell people is we've built suits,
Yep.
professional. Now, professional, ethical killers, but also people that are normal people that let's go
Correct.
out and have a beer,
Yep.
right? Like, we're not too stuffy, we're not too unapproachable. So, but a lot of people think it's all on TV. A lot of people think it's, oh, I give you $1 now, you're my lawyer, or whatever, stuff like that. Um, and it does. I mean, look, criminal defense can still be the
It's
Wild
sticky.
West.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course,
it
of
it,
course.
it
Yeah,
definitely
we're not
is.
going to shade it. Yeah.
Right. But I think one thing is, at our level, we've been able to pick and choose our clients. We've been able to kind of pick and choose who we work best with. And for us, it's really, we represent a lot of either white collar or blue collar, but professionals, people who have something to lose. So
Hmm.
my favorite clients of all time, and we do all types of state and federal cases,
Yep.
but my favorite clients of all time are nurses and teachers,
Hmm.
representing them in anything, but
Yep.
especially DUIs, because DUI is a mistake crime. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of mental health and substance
For sure.
abuse issues going on, especially after COVID. But
Hmm.
nurses and teachers are professionals who don't make a lot of money.
Correct.
And so everybody can, criminal defense lawyers go, oh, I love to represent the wealthy doctor or the, business entrepreneur who has a white collar case. Yeah, we
Yeah,
represent them and
of
they're
course.
great.
Yeah.
But when you have somebody who's a nurse who's doing great work for the community, or a teacher who's educating our youth, and they're going through something and they say, look, Adam, I'm not rich, but I
Hmm.
know you might be double the cost of your competition, but
Yeah.
I need you so bad. Can you just work with me on a payment plan? Because this is
Hmm.
so important to me.
Yeah.
You know, those are my favorite clients, right?
Yeah.
Because they want us, they trust us, they're great clients, but they have a lot to lose
Hmm.
and they're professionals.
Correct.
So that's great. But we do love all of our clients,
Of
of
course. Of
course, but
course. Of course.
but we've been able to build kind of a higher status firm too, which is nice. You
Yeah.
won't see me. Look, when I was 26 years old in 2008 trying to keep the lights on, did
Yeah.
I meet a client in, right, legitimately paying client in a Burger King parking lot to give me
Yeah.
$500
A-
cash?
absolutely.
Did I meet a client at the Popeyes on Commercial Boulevard,
Yeah.
to pick up a few $100?
Yeah,
Absolutely. And
that's relatability. So you
right,
have that perspective, right? So
you know,
that's good.
I'm not doing it now,
Yeah,
right?
no,
But
no, of course
did
not.
I? And it's funny. The guy who I met at the Popeyes, he was sitting back in the booth, like with his arms out, like he was the king of Popeyes, and it was like he was like like that was his criminal enterprise, was running the
Hmm.
Popeyes. It was
Yeah,
great. He was such a trip. He was an awesome client. But
yeah,
yeah, I hustled and did those things, and I'm proud of it
of
because
course.
you got to hustle. But now, no, we it's a little bit of a different atmosphere for us.
No, no, for sure. So another question I have for you: what should someone do if they are arrested? What are the first steps?
Well, you got to hire the right lawyer, the best lawyer or law firm immediately. Time is your friend. The earlier we do get hired, look, it's like golf. I don't know if you're a
Mhm.
golfer,
A little bit.
or any type of boating, planes, navigation, right? But if you're golfing, right, and you're teeing off right here. So for those of you that can watch, you're teeing off, and if you line up and I'm not a good golfer at all, by the way, but
Yeah,
if you line up 5 degrees off, well, by the time you hit that drive, you're going to be so off course through, whether it's 150, 200, 300 yards away by just a simple 5 degrees off in the beginning versus if you're straight on. So the earlier we get hired, the earlier we can start to influence the course of representation,
for
the
sure.
better. Um, don't put your head in the sand and do nothing, which some
Correct.
people do,
Hmm.
but also do your due diligence,
Correct.
right? So what I always tell people, some most instances I've learned this firsthand in my own life, cheap ends up being expensive. And I'm sure you can
Correct.
relate
Yeah, I
in
can relate in
home
construction.
building,
Yeah, 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 for sure. Cheap
right?
always ends
Cheap
up expensive. Yep.
always, 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 always.
Hmm.
And again, even in your field, there's good people who maybe aren't so skilled, and
Correct.
there's maybe some bad intentioned people who are just shysters. And then there's the few that are good people, extremely skilled, good at communicating, will talk through with the client, right,
Yeah.
with the clients, and give a high level of skill, but also customer service, because customer service is in everything,
No,
right? It
customer
really
service
is.
is literally everything. For sure. What are some common mistakes people make when dealing with law enforcement that can hurt their
Talk,
case?
talk, always
Hmm.
talk.
Hmm.
Especially when we're talking, it's funny, right? Our clients have been through the system. A vast majority of them know not to talk,
Yep.
but our our clients, our nurses, our teachers, our doctors, our whoever are, just people first time in, they're scared. It could be a housewife, it could be anybody, it could be you, it could be me, it could be right, our family. Most people, when they do something wrong, they feel remorse, they feel guilt, which is great to teach your kids and my kids,
For
but
sure.
it's not good for people to do with law enforcement. And
Hmm.
usually the better, you know, the, the better the person, the more guilty they are. And then
Correct.
the more they
The
talk,
more
which I
they
tell them, I'm
talk,
like,
yeah,
look,
they over talk. Yeah.
and I tell people, I say, listen, you save that for whatever God you believe in. You save that for your religious
Yeah,
spiritual advisor.
yeah, exactly.
You don't
But
do that to the
but
cop.
not for law enforcement. Yeah, no, I no, that's great, great advice. So this brings me back to I played football in college, and we would have this attorney come talk to the team, and his number one advice would be shut the f up, right?
Yep.
And it resonates, with me a ton, and that's absolutely the best advice when it comes to understanding your rights and preserving, your rights. So how should someone handle being questioned by police? Should they ask for when should they ask for attorney?
Right. You should always ask for an attorney. So you don't want to be a jerk. Even if the cops are being a jerk to you, you don't want to be a jerk. Polite, respectful, short and sweet. No, thank you. I'd like to speak to my attorney. That's it. Polite, respectful. And in today's day and age with body cameras, now look, the undercover drug cops still don't have body cameras, okay? But everybody else generally does in 2025, And so they're they're supposed to be a little bit better and not as shady and dirty. Um, you know, but most cops, at least, I mean, it depends who you're dealing with, right?
Mhm.
As far as the level of respect or customer service they'll give you, but just no matter what, even if you're afraid of getting beat up, you just polite, respectful.
Polite,
Officer, no,
polite,
thank
polite,
you.
polite.
No, thank you.
Mhm.
I'd like to speak to my lawyer. That's it. And
No,
just
no.
live to fight another day.
So I have this saying, and that's because the criminal justice background is if you win, you lose. If you lose, you lose. All right. So being polite, being respectful, and understanding your rights is the best position that you could truly be in if you are in a
Right.
situation, any situation really.
Right. And Sam, the police have a saying, which, once I heard, I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, I get it. And it's you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. And what it
Ooh.
means is,
Mhm.
you can beat the criminal charge,
Correct.
possibly.
Yeah.
But if we want to take you to jail, give you the ride to
Yeah, it's
jail,
going to be uncomfortable.
you're going no matter what. You're
Yeah,
not
it's
winning an
still going to
argument.
be uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right. And yeah. And I even tell people, I say, look, if I had the power to swoop in like Batman and prevent you from being arrested, well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be worth billions, right?
Mhm.
And how cool would that be? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I can't do that. No lawyer can.
Correct, 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 correct. So, what's the difference between a public defender and hiring a private criminal defense attorney?
So not always, but generally you're going to get a better lawyer, but not always. Some public defenders are amazing. And look, I can tell you, every lawyer I've ever hired in my firm has been a public defender at one point or
Mhm.
another. Um, but so but I can tell you there's some awful PDs out there, but there's some great ones. There really are. There's some awful private lawyers. The major difference is, well, number one, you're going to get to choose your lawyer. So one of the problems with the PD's office is they're limited in the representation they can give you. So there's a lot of other things that they can't do pre-arrest investigation work. They can't work on the DMV issues for DUI cases. It's pretty much, and so pretty much when I say, you hire a lawyer immediately, well, the public
Correct.
defender is not really going to meet you until you're at your arraignment, which can be 60
Mhm.
days after you've been arrested. So they're
Correct.
not doing a lot of that initial work. Also, you get who you get. So if you walk into court and you're like, oh, I have this guy, I really want that girl. She's amazing. Too bad.
Mm-mm.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So you get to choose your private lawyer. Doing due diligence and research is very important, but also you're going to get from a good law firm great customer service. You're going to be able to talk to us. You're going to be able to text us, email us. We're going to have a team that knows what they're doing. It's all about better, really high level skill, but great communication and customer service as well. And I think those are some really big keys. Now, look, it's going to cost you money,
Of course.
right? But again, you know, cheap can be very expensive in the
Correct.
long run.
And one of the things you mentioned very early on is caseload, right?
Yeah.
And and with a public defender, and the amount of caseload could be 150 to 200 cases, and let's just be honest, 150 to 200 cases service wise, they although it's well intentioned, there's no way they are going to be able to service you at the level that
No.
you need to. So when we talk about private defense attorneys, it's expensive, but it's always a better option for better representation, and that's what you need if you ever need to defend yourself. So,
Right. You
uh,
you have to look at it as an investment in your future. Now,
correct,
it's an investment you wish you never had to make, but
correct.
that's what it is. It's an investment in your future.
Yep, yep, yep. What are some key factors that determine whether a case goes to trial or gets settled with a plea deal?
Um, number one, above everything, I'd say is the client's risk tolerance. So, we have some clients and we always talk about trial when we meet with clients for the first time, because I truly believe, you begin with the end in mind, right?
Correct.
And you think about the end goal day one. But I have some clients, we'll at least discuss some of that, and they start shaking and crying, and I can't go to trial. And I'm like, I'm not saying you will, but we kind of talk it through. And we have some clients that say, look, if you can't guarantee me not to
Mhm.
spend another minute in jail, I'm not
Oh,
going to trial. I'm not
geez.
risking it. And
Yeah.
then you have a system where innocent people will plead guilty to get probation or maybe a felony reduced to a misdemeanor because of the risk analysis. And look, it's 2025. We just had the ASAP Rocky trial. So he was offered probation right before the trial date, and
Hmm.
he turned it down.
Oh,
And
wow.
the prosecutors, it was a hotly contested trial. And the prosecutors went on the record and said, if we win, we're asking for about 13 years in prison. How do
Hmm.
you go from offering somebody probation to then afterwards trial going, yeah, now we think 13 years in prison is appropriate, right? It's called a trial tax.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
to his
exactly.
credit, yeah, and to his credit, he took the risk and he won.
Hmm. Hmm.
But there's a lot of other people that wouldn't take that risk. So that's a
Correct.
big factor. But of course, preparation,
Right.
evidence, all that stuff
Hmm.
is,
So you brought up ASAP Rocky, and I think it's a great point to kind of bring up. So what does it look like if you take a deal versus taking it to trial? How does the prosecution look at time and leverage when it comes to a situation like
well,
that?
you usually will get a better deal, and look, it's hard because drop, having a felony charge reduced to a misdemeanor, I mean, it's hard to pass up, especially
Correct.
if a lot of times some of our clients are guilty of something, but they
Correct.
might not be guilty of what they're charged with. A
Hmm.
lot of people are overcharged.
Hmm.
But really it's our innocent clients that are the real hard ones. And we have a lot of innocent clients. We really do. But it's a hard determination. And that's where, look, you have to trust your lawyer or your law team. Trust is the foundation of every relationship. It's the foundation of being a parent-child. It's the foundation of being a husband and wife, right? It's all about trust. And so a lot of that is working through that trust, working through those conversations. Usually we will get better plea deals, and but also I do tell clients that I say, look, the harder we push and the closer we get to trial, usually means at the 11th hour we can get a better deal in a lot of
Correct.
cases, not always.
Correct.
Some cases
Hmm.
it is better to just go slow and continue
Correct.
to slow and steady kind of tortoise it. Other cases it's better to be that hare and really aggressive and push hard. It just depends on the case, depends on the prosecutor, depends on the client. Truly, there is no such thing as one size fits all in criminal
No,
defense.
no, no. There really isn't. So, Can you explain the process of building a strong defense?
So the earlier the better. You have to build rapport with the clients. You
Correct.
have to have a really strong client interview and discussion. Look, we just got hired on a very serious case that's making national media attention the last few days. So I've been knee deep in this, and we've had our expert, our expert psychologist or doctor go out to see our client in the jail immediately. Speed is key. We have our private investigator going out and getting surveillance video, speaking to witnesses, finding new witnesses, especially the more serious the case. You got to go fast on these
Correct.
things, but you also have to balance speed with thinking it through and having the right
Correct.
strategy.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things, especially in the more serious cases. Evaluating, right, getting witness statements, and just getting in early. Look, if it's a drug and alcohol related issue, getting the client into treatment right away,
Hmm.
whether it's mental health or substance abuse, very key, very
Yep.
important.
You're right.
A lot of different things. Yeah. So, and you just you learn from experience. That's what it is. You really do.
Hmm. So, what role does evidence play in criminal defense, and how do you challenge prosecutors' evidence?
So there's a lot of different ways. I mean, there's we have motions to suppress if it's a
Correct.
violation of your Fourth, Fifth, or Sixth Amendment constitutional rights. Mostly the Fourth, a little bit of the Fifth, not so much of the Sixth, a little bit of the Sixth. Um, there could be motions in limine that are not constitutional reasons to exclude evidence, but more evidentiary reasons or fact-based reasons to exclude evidence. And one thing I tell all our clients, I say, look at it in three buckets. Bucket one right here is what the cops and the prosecutors think happened. Bucket
Right.
two is the God's honest truth. What we
Hmm.
all, right? We might
Correct.
not even know the God's honest truth, but it is what it
Yeah,
is.
that is what it is. Yep.
Yeah. And number three is the world that I play in,
Correct.
which is
What we
what
think happens.
well, no, 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 it's not what we think. It's level three is what's admissible in court
Okay.
under
Perfect. Perfect.
under
That's
the
even
rules
better.
of yeah,
Yeah.
under the
Yeah.
rules of criminal procedure and
Hmm.
evidence.
Yeah.
And unless our client is truly innocent, I don't give a shit about the truth.
Yeah.
I don't care about what they think happened. I care about what's provable.
Hmm.
And if you look at it like a right, I'm sure you've been to weddings and functions where there's a fancy ice sculpture swan.
Yep. Yep.
It's
Yep. I
beautiful,
have.
right?
Hmm.
Well, it started off as an ugly block of ice and it gets chipped and chiseled and shaved and polished and it becomes that beautiful ice sculpture. And I tell a lot of clients that's what we do as a defense attorney because it's not about the truth unless you truly are innocent. It's about what's provable in
Google
court,
under. Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
can we chip this off?
Yeah.
Hey, you made an admission? Was it illegally gathered? Can we chip it off?
Tip it off.
Gone. Okay,
Yeah. Exactly.
fantastic.
Hmm.
Is it a DUI and you blew three times the legal limit? Well, can we chip that off?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Hmm.
Great. So that's the world I live in. And I educate our clients on that so they truly understand because they don't know, right? And we have to kind of break it down so they really understand what our job is.
No, for sure. That's a great explanation of your vantage point and how your approach, factors into defense. So, how do you approach defending clients when odds are stacked against them?
I mean, it's building rapport, trust with the clients. It's working. There's been many cases, and look, not every case is quote unquote winnable. But if I
Right.
asked you, if I said, Sam, I had a client the other day get 5 years in prison. Is that a win or a loss? What would you say?
It depends. It depends on what the case is, but I have that
Exactly.
perspective, right? So
Right. So
yeah.
so then if I right, and a lot of people say, "Oh my God, that's terrible. You did a terrible
Hmm.
job." And I say, "Well, what if I told you the client's on surveillance video, with an
Hmm.
AK-47,
Yeah.
or shooting up about 50 rounds
Yeah.
at somebody in a
Yeah.
storage facility in West Park,
Hmm.
right? And there's a
Yeah.
25-year mandatory minimum,
Right.
and I
Hmm.
got him 5 years,
That's a win.
right? That's
Hmm.
amazing. So a
Hmm.
lot of it's perspective. And look, not every case can be truly won, but it's about perspective. And look, we've also had many cases where day one, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a tough one.
Hmm.
And we work, you do the work. And
You do the work.
sometimes, a lot of times, it just gets better.
Correct.
Cases are unpredictable. And it's our job to force the prosecutors to do their job.
To do the
And
job. No,
witnesses
I
disappear, things happen.
No, I agree with that. And what I found out is very similar to what we described with the public defenders being overworked. There's a lot of times the prosecutors are overworked as well. So the defense job is to put on the best case possible and have to defend this the case that's being brought before them,
Mhm.
and refute that. So how should people know how should people defend a DUI charge, and how should they fight that? If they have a
Well,
DUI charge.
there's a thing called the 10-day rule that you need to do to save your driver's license. You can try to do it on your own. You're probably going to screw it up. You need to hire a lawyer immediately for a DUI. Number one, there's two things that we do. And this is the way to know the real difference between lawyers that actually know what they're doing on a DUI versus criminal lawyers that just say, oh, yeah, I'll do a DUI. DUIs have two parts: the criminal case, right? Judge, prosecutor, jail fines, probation, criminal record, and the DMV. My license is suspended for either 6 months because I gave a breath test, or either
Correct.
12 or 18 months because I refused. Public defenders can't handle the DMV by law.
Hmm.
They're not allowed. A lot of private criminal lawyers don't know what they're doing or are scared or intimidated to do this. So they charge low fees and only do this.
Hmm.
So you have to find, a law firm that knows both. And within the 10 days, this is the most important thing. And when we're talking about parents who need to drive to take their kids to school or need to drive to work, it's essential.
Hmm.
And if you screw that up, well, then people have a choice of either
Correct.
drive illegally and then get caught and make your situation 10 times worse, or
Mm,
don't drive when we could get you a hardship license if you just did it the right way.
correct.
So again, speed is very important, but
Correct.
also trust, do your due diligence. And there's good lawyers out there, but
Hmm.
also there's personality conflicts. There's a few really good lawyers that we get maybe two or three clients every year that will fire them and hire us. And I'll talk to
Hmm.
my clients. I'll say, well, she's a great lawyer.
Correct.
Why?
Correct. Correct. Hmm.
Right? Because also we want to vet the client. Is this a client that
Correct.
we want to
Yeah,
work
you
with?
have to vet them. Yeah.
And right, maybe the client's unrealistic or going to be a handful, right?
Hmm.
But a lot of times we hear, well, she is great, but I don't like her. She doesn't, my DUI feels small to her,
Mm,
or I
okay.
feel that way, or every time I talk to her, she's bragging about her and not really trying to get to know or care about me. So much of this is also the vibe. It's the relationship, customer service, it's trust. Those things are essential because there are a few really good lawyers in South Florida. But you got to be, look, it's like doctors too. You have to be a great lawyer and a great lawyer for that client,
No, for
right?
sure.
And that's so important. It really is. So you want to vet them and you want to, do you feel it or not, right? Do you really feel like this is somebody
This
who
is
I
the
want to put my life,
right
my
fit.
future in?
No, no, no. I agree. I agree with
Yeah.
you. So,
Look, same thing with my wife when we were picking, OBs for when she was pregnant,
yeah.
right? It's so important to
No, for
have that
sure.
trust and relationship.
No, for sure. How has technology, whether it's social media, surveillance or AI, impacted criminal defense cases?
Well, lawyers tend to be very slow to adapt to technology. So our firm, we're at the forefront of this.
Hmm.
So we use Salesforce for our technology, for our backend, for our entire firm runs on Salesforce. Salesforce is a publicly traded company. It's
Hmm.
a lot more expensive than the
Correct.
lawyer out of the box solutions, but as we continue to grow, I want the best of the best, and I want a better experience for our clients, and I want our team to be more efficient.
Hmm.
We're using AI a ton, and we're not, everybody knows that lawyer who had it write a brief and it hallucinated, right? Well, that's just malpractice. I mean, that's laziness. We're using AI to supplement and to make us better and more efficient. We're not using AI to replace lawyers or legal assistants. We're using it to make our lawyers and legal assistants better.
Better. Yep.
And better, so we can better help our client. We can be
Correct.
more efficient. If a motion would take us 6 hours to research and write, and now it
Correct.
takes us an hour, well,
Correct.
then think about it.
That was
We're
helpful.
doing better work for our clients.
Hmm.
Um, we're putting in a lot of other things with some of our marketing, some of our processes and procedures. We're building out some really cool technology to to be able to go through body cameras at a first glance. So before the lawyers and our staff looks at it, just to really give us some key highlights and to summarize things, which is pretty cool. Of course, there's no substitute for watching, the whole body camera, and we do, but giving it kind of that first pass. So I'm very interested in the tech and AI, and I think it's only going to make firms like ours even better.
No, I agree with you on that. It's not a shortcut. It's just more precise calibration on gathering your thoughts, or
Right.
things like that. I use it a lot. I have it on my home screen, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm using a bunch right now. I'm really
Mhm,
loving Perplexity because I think Perplexity
mhm,
has the ability to replace Google, like crazy
correct.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I look at AI as a significant and major enhancement,
Hmm.
not a replacement.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference.
So if there was a young lawyer that wanted to get into criminal defense, what would you say, what would you recommend that attorney do if they were really interested in getting
Right.
into criminal
S-
defense?
So in criminal law, you have to be a PD or prosecutor to get started. I mean, you
Hmm.
just do. That is your medical school residency.
Yeah.
2 to 3 years,
Hmm.
right? 2 to 3 years is enough where you're trying serious cases and you get a good experience. 6 months, not enough. You can stay there. I mean, some of our lawyers were PDs for 10 years before they came over, and they're massively successful board certified attorneys. But really minimum 2 to 3 years. You have to.
Hmm.
You just do. We run an amazing summer internship program for people that are interested in criminal defense. And every summer, we're actually taking applications still now. We take about 10 interns. We take about 4 law students, 3 undergrad, and 3 high schoolers. We limit the high schoolers now to American Heritage students because I actually teach there now. And
Hmm.
I coached high school basketball there. So I have a
Okay,
deep
cool.
connection with American Heritage.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
um, and they're doing some really cool things out in the school. But high school and law students, so we take about 7 or 8 college and law students every summer, and we give them the most amazing immersive experience. They see everything in our firm. I still run it. It's my most favorite time of the year when we have interns. Everybody loves interns, but we made a bit of an academic curriculum,
Correct.
a whole lecture series, and they're working on cases. I mean, they're
No,
learning.
that's a amazing experience. Just wanted to say thank you for coming on and dropping so much knowledge on everybody when it comes to criminal defense. Obviously, I know you personally, I know your work, and I know the level of effort that you bring to the table. One of the questions that we like to end with is, what is your best lessons learned with life and in business?
So they're excuse me, I mean, they're the same because life and business are so interconnected, and I think really, they're together. Um, be honest, be genuine, give a shit, care about people, care about yourself, care about the work that you do. I was telling I teach high school criminal law and criminal procedure at American Heritage, and I was telling my students today, I said, what really does matter, meaning you have to be skilled. But
Hmm.
that's a baseline.
Yeah.
Once you hit that baseline level, who and the relationships you develop, massive.
Correct.
Right? So
Hmm.
it's all of those things. It's building relationships. And again, relationships are founded upon trust. It's working hard, blue collar work ethic, white collar skill and ability. And it's a lot easier to have that blue collar work ethic when you care and you enjoy what you do. So I know so many people that are now in their 40s, hitting 15, 20 years in the law, going, what did I do? I'm
Hmm.
miserable. And they're
Hmm.
having that existential midlife crisis. Well, I'll never have that because I love what I do.
Love what you do.
And I've had the benefit of having lots of mentors. I'm not I'm not the primary attorney on most of our cases anymore.
Correct.
Help
Thank
is
you.
needed. I love the
Hmm.
strategy, but
Yeah.
I'm working on the business. I'm
Yeah.
working
I
on
mean,
growing.
working on
I'm being the
growing. Yeah.
relationship guy.
Hmm.
And I love the work, but I love our clients and I love my team more and continuing to
Hmm.
build and grow.
No, for sure.
And being on your podcast, right? And being able to talk. Like these are great things.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Like I said, this definitely was a blessing because I feel like there was so much value that you brought to the table, so much life experience, so much great information when it comes to criminal defense. So just wanted to say thank you again for coming on. Thank you for joining the Pro Design Builder. It's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design. Thank you.
Yep.